Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Good afternoon and welcome to Whistleblower Nation. I'm your host, Ella Free. In a country where truth is sometimes regarded as treason, I have the utmost respect for people who stand up to injustice. By definition, a whistleblower is a person who makes public disclosures of wrongdoing, corruption, and crime. So this show is, I'm here to celebrate whistleblowers, and that's what this show is all about. So if things worked out okay, we have George Webb on the line. Did we get a chance to pull him in? Let's see, we're trying to get him on the line.
I'm in the process of calling him now.
All right. And if we're unable to reach him, which, let's see.
It just hung up. Didn't even try again.
Okay. If you don't know who he is, he's an investigative journalist, and I've interviewed him before on Triumph Over Targeting podcast, and if things work out, and I'm hoping it will, we'll have him on.
I believe he has joined us.
Great.
This is George. I didn't hear you first off. I apologize.
That's okay. I'm glad you could make it. I was a little concerned because I tried to confirm with you, and I know you're busy, and I knew you were alive because I saw your YouTube video you posted this morning. So
sometimes I check my YouTube videos to make sure I'm alive as well. So you're not the only one.
That's good. Well, I'm so glad to have you on and speak to you from this new format. So this is a perfect place for you, Whistleblower Nation. So I set it up so we can celebrate people like you, and you can share some of the information. And I guess one thing I know I consider you an accidental whistleblower, an accidental journalist. Maybe for the listeners who are not familiar with you, you can tell them a little bit about your background, like how you fell into this field and how you are doing what you're doing these days.
Well, thank you. There's a great series out there written called The Accidental Journalist by a gal in Boston named Trish Negron, Trishnegron. So if people want to read that, she's done 7 installments, and she's got that Harvard hand, the beautiful prose and all that.
Right.
I will give you my Miami of Ohio, quick and dirty version, which is basically I was a computer sales guy. I sold hardware for a number of years, decades, and I sold software after that for decades, mostly in web and network infrastructure, network analysis. So as far away from journalism as you can get. But as events, every once in a while you stick your nose in the political world, and sometimes you get bit. And just strange stuff, started happening. Small stuff, but just it was almost like I was on a deplorables list. Nothing directed at me, like the whole world against me, but just like weird stuff. Like getting a job offer, and then be sitting in the CEO's office toasting, the new position, and then the next day saying, "Well, we think we're going to go a different direction." Stuff like that.
Right, almost like you're blacklisted.
So, yeah, it is sort of a blacklist. And as more I researched it, and I looked into some of the things the Department of Defense had done in Europe, in Germany especially after the Second World War, kind of with the CIA working with the old guys that were in the Nazis, Reinhard Gehlen and so forth. So, right here in Fort Hunt, right here in not far from where I am in D.C. right here, it really was a program to, against an entire population called a low-intensity conflict or a low-intensity operation, which is basically saying we need a losers list, or we need a blacklist, and we need to gradually degrade a certain class of people for whatever reason, for political reasons, for economic reasons, for just because they're undesirable, etc. And
right.
When I'd seen enough of it, 5-6 years of it, I finally said, "Hey, this isn't going to stop. The ending of this isn't good." So that kind of drove me into journalism. I said, "Well, I guess if I'm going to live it, I may as well write about it."
That's right. And here you are. So what was the first thing that you first tried to bring to light, or what was your first area of interest? I'd imagine this whole whatever was happening to you was of interest, and why. So,
well, strangely enough, it was to do with an FBI case in Portland, Oregon, called the Christmas tree bomber case.
Yeah, and I'm from Portland, Oregon, too, so I am familiar with that.
Yeah, you know the case. And they had taken this kid, and I didn't realize all this at the start. And, of course, the government doesn't present this when they first go to trial. But they'd worked with him 3 years, starting before. He was a Somali kid going to Oregon State, good kid. They'd worked with him 3 years, 3 different informants had lived with him. I mean, we're talking long-term entrapment. They'd taken all of his phone calls. They had all these people overseas sending them, one female. There was a love interest with the informant. So it was really an incredible, complex entrapment over a number of years just to get this kid to one night on the Christmas tree lighting ceremony in our main square, Pioneer Square downtown in Portland, to press a cell phone button, right? And he got 30 years. Well, I started unwinding the case and said, who's the guy who ran this thing? Turns out it was our guy, who's the number 2 guy at the FBI right now, Andrew McCabe. And that started, it's almost like a Les Miserables, Javert thing with me. This guy has been on my case now for like 7 years.
Now we are back live.
Hi, so are we back now? Am I live?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. We had a little, this seems like the station had a server or the station crashed, but we're back. That's what matters. So we have George Webb on the line, very, very popular journalist. And also, before we get further into our discussion, you have this very successful YouTube channel, and I think you have like 12 million it's really, you have such a high amount of viewers and listeners. So will you give your statistics on that? Because I know it's really high.
Well, I don't look at it very often, but let me go look at it. So let's see, on YouTube. I think what is a little different about my channel is I don't take the news of the day. A lot of the news readers on YouTube, and they're good. I mean, H.A. Goodman and stuff like that. They'll kind of take the news of the day and just kind of read the news, giving it a little bit of a bent, whatever the news might be. And what I tend to do is focus in on pay to play. So I focus in on corruption, and specifically national corruption, national security, national pay to play. And so that really narrows down my focus, and it's much more complex fraud than, covering the local bank robbery and so forth. Mm-hmm. So my videos tend to follow up and chain together. There's usually continuity between all the videos in one day. I might do 2 or 3 minute videos in one day, and they all kind of chain together. So that's why I have a lot of minutes viewed. I think the last time I looked at it, and I can't, I'm trying to get to it right now. It was in the millions. Yeah, it was like 7 million viewers and 12 million minutes viewed, something like that. Yeah.
It's interesting, which I was surprised about, because when you were on my other show, a lot of people had heard about you, which I didn't know, and so many people respect you. I've never heard really a negative thing about you. One person thought you were an agent, but whatever, they call everybody an agent. And so, but then, some of the bigger guys, I know a lot of like government whistleblowers and like big, powerful people that have worked in the government, and they know who you are. It's like everybody knows this guy. That's amazing, and with great respect too. So
yeah, well, I think, when you work a beat that's very tight, I'm in Washington, D.C. every day. I'm on South Capitol Hill every day. I go to the same restaurants every day. I watch them going into the Capitol, Hill Grill, every day. So, a lot of times I'll, be with 10 or 12 members of Congress, usually the House side, very seldom the Senate side. For one evening, wine and cheese nibbler, and then I'll sit next to a congressman during a baseball game or whatever. I usually meet about 1 or 2, and there's a lot, 435, it's a lot. So, But I do know the beat, and I am around a lot. And just from being around a lot, sometimes you get you gain expertise that you wouldn't have otherwise have. Because I talk to legislative assistants every day, every night. I talk to legislative directors every day. Chief of staff, I talk to them every day.
Right.
So, but then I can corroborate that with what's actually being reported, which is completely 180% scheduled and fake. It's amazing, actually, the difference between actually what is real and what is reported. There's no
Right.
there's no tie between the two, other than the fact that it's on the CNN TV while I'm sitting there, at dinner. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So I know you have all, so I understand it's corruption that you're focusing on. And when we had a conversation a couple of weeks back, I guess you're focusing on Congress right now. Do you want to get into that topic, or do you want to talk a little bit more about, some of the deep state corruption, or kind of the watching of civilians and citizens and dissidents? Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. Well, the key case I'm covering, and I have for the last, 250 days now, is the Awan case. And we just had Representative Steve King come out today. And he's one of the leading conservatives from Iowa 4, which is kind of Ames, Iowa, area, central Iowa. And he said, look, this clan, he called it a clan, these 4 brothers, 1 wife, and friend, who have been all earning $160,000 a year up on Capitol Hill, for no-show jobs or straw ghost jobs, have also been going to the key guy, Imran Awan, going to Pakistan for 3 months out of the year, transferring terabytes of data to Pakistan, hundreds of suspicious activities in terms of money transfers to Pakistan. Okay. Now, Steve King is the guy who came out today, just a couple of minutes ago, and said that is the least of our worries. These Awans selling secrets to Pakistan and other countries is our greatest concern. It's no longer the $5 or $6 million that they got in fake salaries. It's no longer the $500,000 in equipment they stole. That's our key concern. So the pressure has moved toward Congress to, they've had kind of a fake hearing, where they have it in the side room and nobody's sworn testimony, and they've had 3 or 4 congressmen come forward. Congressman Jordan from Ohio came forward and asked questions. Congressman Perry, who I'm quite impressed with, I can't remember what state he's from right off the bat, came forward and asked some good questions. Obviously, King from Iowa, and the guy who's been leading the charge is Louis Gohmert, from Texas. So they had this kind of side on this last Thursday. They had kind of a side subcommittee meeting, but it was not an official. And all this information came out, like I just told you, with the terabytes of information, the illegal money transfers, the guy spending 3 or 4 months out of the year while making $160,000 a year in Congress. And King has really kind of lit the fire now for congressional hearings on this. I call this the spy ring in Congress. I also think there's some pay to play going on. You don't steal secrets just to steal secrets. You steal because they're worth money, right? And you can use them for pay to play, for arms deals and worse. So I'm focusing a lot right now on the House Arms Committee, because these Awans worked inside of the House. They were the House IT providers, mainly for the Democrats, and they mainly focused on 3 critical committees in the House: the House Intel Committee, the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and the House Homeland Security Committee. And that's who we want accessing all of our classified information, is someone like Pakistan, who has not always been our friend, hiding Osama bin Laden. They are what they call a MENA. Pakistan's a MENA, which is, it's actually MNNA, which is near NATO, most near NATO nation, meaning they're almost a NATO nation. Well, you have General Mattis, Secretary of Defense, and Chief of Staff Dunford going there and saying, hey, we're going to knock you guys off this MENA list. You're going to go down, with all the other nations. You're not going to be a favored nation anymore, because we're tired of this drug trade. We're tired of this arms for drug trade. Mm-hmm. So that's not where you want all of our congressional secrets. And Steve King today from Iowa said all of our secrets from all members, not just the Democrats, and he said classified info today. So my focus is on that, really now going for those congressional committees. We need real hearings like we had with Iran-Contra, only this is going to be Awan-Contra.
Yeah, that's Anyways, so that's what you're focusing on right now. And what are you hoping to get out of this particular investigation, or what can we do to participate in helping kind of disclose this or try to make a difference?
You can right there, right now, wherever you are, participate. If you go to my videos from yesterday, go to George Webb channel, you'll see where I outline all the folks we're trying to get to send a letter to their congressman, and I have a sample letter on the website, and it's basically called a spoliation notice. And when before you sue someone, you put them on notice saying, "Hey, don't throw anything away. No matter what even if you normally clear your desk at the end of the day and throw everything away, save everything because you're about ready to be sued." So what I also do as a journalist is I also engage in citizen legal work. So I've filed several motions in the Awan cases here in D.C. District Court. We're also going to file against the Awans in civil court now, and so I'm preparing a civil lawsuit right now. So you, sitting at home, can be a participant and a plaintiff if you've ever, since the year 2000, you've ever called your congressman, wrote your congressman, gone to a congressional event, visited a congressman here in Washington, D.C., you will be in a system called iConstituent. iConstituent, just like a constituent of a congressman, only put an I in front of it, right? And that will put you in this record database. Well, this is part of the data. This is part of the data, some of the most sensitive things that you would tell your congressman, sort of the relationship you would have with an accountant or maybe even a priest in some cases, depending on if your son had, maybe had come home from the Afghanistan and had a drug problem or something like that. You would be confiding some very personal information with your congressman. That information is what has been transferred to Pakistan. Now, that doesn't sound very, very valuable unless you know about what opiate targeting is. Opiate targeting is a way of countries that have been under the thumb of or been a victim in their eyes of U.S. defense, DOD bombing or droning as a way of soft targeting members of the armed forces and their families. So this is very serious. It's a very serious breach of sending this kind of information over to Pakistan. And there is wide evidence of these huge increases in opiate overdoses and opiate deaths.
Yes.
That something's going on. Something is going on. Now, I'm not saying that the Pakistani ISI intelligence services are doing opiate targeting in the United States, but I'm not saying they're not. So what you can do is you can go to my website, you can copy that letter, send it to your representative, find out who your representative is, send it to your representative, and that puts them on notice to hold all records. Right now, we have about 130. We started the campaign yesterday. We already have 130 congressional districts out of the 435. We are now targeting all the members of the House Armed Services Committee to make sure every one of them, we have almost every state. We need North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming. Liz Cheney Liz Cheney being the representative from Wyoming. We need Liz Cheney. We want to say we have every 50 states, Mr. Chairman. We want to know why our data is going to Pakistan. And we can now sue in civil court because we have reasonable suspicion that it is going there. So that's the plan. We're, like I said, we've already got a quorum. Quorum in the Senate, quorum in the House usually requires 20%. We're way over 20%. We already have a quorum, but we might get all 435. We might get people in every district to say they have what they call standing. If you've ever sent any email, called your congressman, anything like that, and you have a record that's been logged into that iConstituent system, you have what they call standing, meaning you have a right to sue. You have a right to sue, and you can be a plaintiff in the action. So that's what we're really looking to do, is build our class out. You can find out if your congressman has been served or not, and if not, you can just send them that letter, and that officially serves them. And we'll let you know. We're probably going to file the lawsuit, maybe next week. Who knows? Maybe the week after, depending on how things change. But already, I mean, we started this yesterday. Already, Steve King came out and said,
that's right,
we need hearings. So they're listening on Capitol Hill now. This has been a buried story for about 200 days, and we just can't wait any longer.
Well, your journalism has paid off, and you're actually doing something about it. And it's really great news. I'm so glad to hear that people are taking action and taking your advice, and that's just really great news.
Yeah, and you're going to be a plaintiff, so I can't promise you more than $1. It could be a lot more than that, depending on if there is opiate targeting and people have been victimized. There's going to be damages to pay by the by the folks involved here. So, but once we get 435, we're closing it. We're just going for the first person in each district. We only want one. We don't want a huge class action suit. I have already said I will only take $1. I want the attorneys who have to put in most of the time to have an attorney share, obviously 20%, something like that. But we gave notice for 459 days. Gave notice, did videos, whatnot, called our congressman. Now it's time to take action. Now's the time to put the congressman on notice that we're turning the clock on a year now, and no more. We have to take it into our own hands if you guys won't.
Well, that's good news. I can't wait to see what happens and what comes about.
Yeah, we'll have to do a follow-up. Yeah.
I definitely have to do a follow-up on that. So what's next on what are you focusing on now, right? What's your next plan of action?
Well, outside that lawsuit, I still have an appeal in D.C. District Court for what they call intervening. A journalist has a right to intervene in a case where the prosecution is deliberately covering up. Not talking about just the defense. I'm talking about the prosecution destroying evidence. I'm talking about the prosecution obstructing justice. Prosecution being negligent, which is what we have in the Iwan case. Okay, so we have a case where an attorney actually did intervene. The guy's name was Carmichael. It's Carmichael versus the United States. I still got that in play. I filed 3 motions there. I'm probably just going to go to the D.C. Court of Appeals. It just depends. If the civil case moves quicker forward, I might just drop that and not appeal that right away. If I have a better case on the civil side, I'll just go put the energy behind the thing that's most likely. The other thing that's outside of targeting armed services is then going to the Foreign Affairs Committee. This is the people that do the Iran deal, the Iran nuclear deal, the nuclear, all these deals, that have been negotiated in secret on Gmail accounts rather than through the normal state.gov emails that are required by law, right? So putting them on notice.
Okay, it's saying we're back up. No, I'm not sure. It'll take about 30 seconds before anybody in chat can hear us. So.
We may or may not be back here on Whistleblower Nation. I've yet to have a show without any issues. It'll be amazing to have like a clean show.
Oh, it'll get there. This spot's been vacant for 6.5 years. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's never been a show at this time on Studio B.
Well, I figured it's Saturday. People aren't at work. Works out for me.
All right, they're still saying dead.
Okay. I'd like to do a middle of the week, like a 6 p.m. Pacific one, but they're all taken.
I don't think all of them are taken on A, but I'm not.
Really?
I'm not sure. You'd have to.
At that time, which is 9 p.m.
If it says behind the door, them are open for shows, if I'm not mistaken.
If it says behind the door?
Yeah, because that show's been canceled.
Ah.
And they're saying not yet, AMAD.
Maybe we'll have to look into it. Because I don't see behind the door when I pull it up. Maybe it's only on your end.
Pardon?
Maybe it's only on your end that you can see that a show is behind the door, because I don't see it.
Oh, it's on the schedule. Studio A schedule.
Can you put a link in?
Yeah.
Okay. I would love to have an evening one.
Now that one I'm not able to produce at that time.
That's okay.
I'm just not. Sometimes I'm not here.
Sometimes you're doing other things. Okay, so behind the table, I don't see any of them.
All right, I think it said all good now. Let me see. Let me turn it on and see for myself. I don't hear nothing now. There it goes now. All right, apparently we're back live, so I can go ahead and call your guest back.
Okay. Are we on air too? They can hear me?
Yeah, they can hear everything we're saying.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We're having some technical difficulties. We have a power failure at the station, so we're getting George Webb, the investigator, the journalist. He's going to be back on in just a second here.
Yeah, I have to go back and get his number. Take me a minute. Uh-oh, I'm not sure what that is.
Another issue?
Oh, was coming from you.
I'm not even sure when the conversation got dropped, where to pick it up at.
I'm not either. Screen.
Hi, this is George. Please leave a message, and I'll get back with you as soon as I can. Thank you.
We'll have to call him.
At the tone, please record your message.
We'll try to get him back on. This has been the most glitchy show yet to date. Let's see.
Oh, goodness.
Okay. Should we try him back one more time?
Yeah, I got to wait till he disappears off the screen.
Okay.
I can't call him. There we go. Now I can call him back again.
It's George.
Hi, George. We actually called you back and it went to voicemail, so luckily we got you this time around.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's okay, no worries. So, it's the power failure issue at the station, but you're back. And so I'm not sure when or where it dropped off and what people did and didn't hear. So we were discussing about your next, your next plan of action, what you were doing next.
Well, you said take on the military-industrial complex, and I think I do that every day. But
you do, yeah.
Yeah, but it brought up a good point, which is my central theory is that everyone, Eisenhower was confused when he said that phrase because everything hit him from left, right, center all the time, always surprising him and so forth. And he didn't realize that there was a method to the madness of him being controlled like that. And that's why he thought the military-industrial complex was far larger and far greater than it was. But in actual fact, it's a parlor trick. It's a parlor trick, sort of like the old gaslighting of widows when you wanted to get their land, when the railroad wanted their land, you just have this team of people doing these, things to, upset your life and make you and put you off balance so that it seems like a massive amount of people are against you and you get this paranoia and so forth. And it's called psychological operations. And what they do, this is perfected at Fort Detrick here in Maryland.
PSYOPs too. People call it PSYOPs. Is that correct?
Yeah,
PSYOPs.
Army PSYOPs. This is where Army PSYOPs is actually based. And there's Army PSYOPs officers, and they give each other badges and patches and the whole thing. And what they look at it as a whole spectrum of attack or conflict. So you start out with these little things, it can be as simple as, leaky faucets and tires that go flat and, just various problems in your home with the heater going out and whatnot, just constantly small, niggly little home maintenance type issues, as well as, just being cut off on the highway and just being, rudely yelled at or given poor service or be the last person to be served in a restaurant. Now, part of that is part of everyday natural life. And that's the beauty of the PSYOP, because you just weave it in, and then anybody who complains about it seems paranoid or seems, whatever. Mm-hmm. But I can assure you, if you read the PSYOPs manual, it says quite the opposite. It says exactly what I'm saying. Well, the military-industrial complex is just that same principle writ large. On national news. The idea of national news is it's so much, it's Korea happening over here, and then this is happening over there, and then this is happening over here, and this is happening over here, and that's happening over there. It's like almost like a fireworks show in reverse, like a horror fireworks show. you just want to say, I want to see a commercial about, Somanex or some kind of drug from some major pharmaceutical now when the commercial comes. You know what I mean? It seems almost like a relief. It's like,
Yes.
Here's something, here's some new pill that I can take, and then to drive that. It's the same idea. The military industrial complex can be beat if you understand who they are. And especially the intelligence agencies. It's this incredibly small intersection of three major agencies, with CIA and FBI, and then they created, of course, in their own image, DHS. But I'm talking about the intersection. You remember your math class when you were a kid. It's the intersection of those three things. It's not the union of those three things. If you focus your energy on that intersection of 5 or 6 people at the main directorate, it's about 12, but there's the key 5 or 6 people working that every day. Focus all your energy on that. You can beat the military industrial complex. You can beat them if you understand who they are. If you deal with all the figments of and all their machinations that they create, all their little magic shows and apparitions they create, you'll never win. You have to focus on the intersection. The CIA started a program about 1993. Some people say it was 84, depending on who you believe, Bush or Clinton, that really started the CIA infiltrating into the FBI. And they did it. They started in D.C., they started in New York, they started in Boston. They did this infiltration called Joint Terrorism Task Force. And a task force is a way of breaking up the normal command structure, breaking up the training normally that you would get, breaking up the sworn officers, getting people with new people that they haven't seen before on a weekly or monthly basis, knocking them off balance, getting them to do the nasty stuff that you want them to do for the elites rather than duty to their countrymen. That's the key of the military industrial complex, especially the intelligence units and agencies. And that's how it works. Incredibly small number of people. So in order to fight them, it's got to be laser focused on who they are and laser focused on their tactics. And you can win. So what I try to do in my YouTube channel is I don't want a lot of followers. I want a lot of contributors.
Nice.
And I try to focus those contributors on research that exposes that intersection, if you will, that intersection.
Yeah. Okay. That's really. I like how you put that. You're looking for some contributors, not followers. That's something I'm going to say too from now on. And
Yep.
You're getting people actively participating, and that sometimes within itself it can be very difficult and daunting. But we need people to contribute. And some people assume, well, if I'm not going to do it, somebody else will do it. And that is a very pervasive attitude and thought process. So we just can't assume that. You have to act like you're the only person, and everything you do matters. And I think that seems to work for activists, and definitely does work for that. When you said, the world's elite, why don't you give us a definition of your opinion of who they are and who is behind the curtain?
Well, Rockefeller started the Council on Foreign Relations basically to have a bunch of smart people get together in a room, both here in Washington and in New York, to basically map out where all the resources are. And once I get the oil lines, I can have pipelines, especially. I can then put in police forces to police those lines. Then I can bring in what they call rat lines, which is I can start illegal trade. I can start drugs in one way and arms going the other way. I can start even worse trade. I can start human trafficking and then organ harvesting and all those other things. So all these things start with an oil pipeline and the Council on Foreign Relations, typically. The CFR here in Washington is really kind of more of a television studio, I think, compared to the CFR where the real decisions are made in New York at Wall Street. Washington is the play. The plays, the plays are run down here. The purse strings are given to the military through NDAA and various bills, right? The pay is up in DC, is up in New York. So it's the pay to play. We run all the plays down here in Washington. Up there, they do the paying for it. But if I pay $1,000, there's usually 1,000 to 1 return. Usually about 1,000 to 1 return on a bribe or a pay to play. So if I pay $1 million, I expect $1 billion in weapons contracts or whatnot. But those are the elite. Those are the, they've all gone to Ivy League schools, and they've gone into the intelligence community, or they've been put into positions of power of industry. There's a great book written by, I can't remember his name right now. I can't believe it. They call The Power Elite. It's written in the 50s, I think. But kind of a combination of military people, key political people, and then key business executives. And I would say probably if I had to put a number on it, I'd say 1,100, the number of people in Clinton Foundation's Frank Giustra partnership.
Is it Charles Mills Wright? Does that sound right?
Charles Mills Wright. Yeah, I can't believe I didn't remember that.
It happens.
Yeah, thank you. yeah. I just all of a sudden, sometimes your brain just goes boop.
Yeah, I was just thinking that a little while ago. But anyways, get back on track here. Charles
Mills Wright. Yeah. It's the Power Elite, and if back then it was something else. It was the Henry Luce Club, the LUCE. He wrote all the. Back then it was all magazines because there was no television, or television was just coming on. So, Forbes magazine, Time magazine, Life, all the big picture book type magazines were all CIA type propositions, and then came RCA and NBC, all those the television stations. The nice part about the internet is it's much harder to control. So there is a chance, in an open coup or open military coup, you need to get the generals on your side. In a soft coup, you need the people. You attack the information. You attack with information. So that's much more difficult to do on the internet. Shows like yours, my channel, and so forth. The people actually have a chance. Now, there's many, many ways that they can disrupt you. They can, the simplest one is have your 17-year-old operative run a car into a power pole and take down the radio station. That they teach that. That's the first thing they teach you at CIA school. So, it can be that simple, or it can be much more sophisticated with these bots that they write that come on your channel and make nasty comments and, call people names. And there's a whole bunch of different things that they've worked on, to try to control this information thing, but they haven't gotten it completely right yet. There's still a chance here.
Yeah, I have some really technical geniuses who try to keep everything up and keep everything clean and keep everything going well. Because these bots, that's a whole nother show. These AI bots that are online and Twitter and doing all the things that they do, and trying to hide information. Those bots can help, help bring a story to light. They use them all the time. This is the big story. It's going to be all over everything. They can use that against people like us. When we're trying to get a story to light. So we're fighting a lot. We're not just fighting, a group of people or a large group of people that don't want people like us and people at the stations like these, speaking out and trying to spread the truth and, reveal what's really going on underneath all this news and, real news. And so, so we're fighting against technology, on so many levels. So, that's a whole nother show as well. But, so to get back to the elite, someone in the chat room mentioned something if they go to a Bilderberg meeting. So what's your thought on that?
Well, Bilderberg, if you, European versus American history can be summed up in the 20th century, maybe between the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, the Rothies versus the Rockies. And, the thing that the Rothschilds didn't see coming was oil. They got to the oil, fields late, and Rockefeller had already developed the infrastructure and was already going around the world, buying up land and so forth. The Rothschilds had mainly done mining. Now they caught up with BP, but after a while, you realize too much competition between each other is not a good thing. We're using all of our resources to fight each other, and then you want to get to a point where you have a sort of a negotiation between the two. Okay, this is yours and this is mine. That's yours, this is mine. And that's what Bilderberg basically is. It's kind of like a negotiation between the two groups, between the kind of the more the Rockefeller type group and the. Mm-hmm. Now Rockefeller's done a lot of good things with his money, but you wouldn't believe the number of people he's destroyed to get it. So it's one of those double-edged swords. I grew up in a city, Cleveland, Ohio, which was where he was from. He built all these great museums. He has all these great universities. great hospitals that he's built, the Einstein Institute, the Rockefeller University, Rockefeller hospitals, all that. But in doing so, he wiped out a whole bunch of great homeopathic solutions that, medicines, and brought in a whole bunch of oil-based, allopathic medicines, and created, monopolies everywhere he went through nasty intelligence type tactics. Most people think Rockefeller giving out dimes to little kids, and that's nothing could be further from the truth. He had I think his main guy that he employed was called Boom Boom for precisely the reason he used dynamite on other people's oil stores. So, that's the history that really doesn't ever get told in the United States. Or it's called Kaboom. I can't remember his name, Boom Boom or Kaboom. I can't remember. But anyway, Rockefeller was a vicious guy, and he took those tactics. And that the elite's tactics to become billionaires isn't a very pretty story. Everybody knows about Ida Tarbell. She was the muckraker that wrote his story, and how he went out and bought all the books that she wrote out of all the libraries and stuff. It was quite the story if anybody wants to look into it. So we still have that legacy in the United States. It doesn't completely control our economy, but it's a much greater shadow than people give it credit for. And the same thing is true with the Rothschilds in Europe, I would say. Same thing.
Right. Okay. Well, that seems to coincide with what many other people believe too. So it's just nice to hear, the opinions from people like yourself, and it seems like people tend to agree on that. We're going to a commercial break here, guys. It's a station message. We'll be back right after these messages.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome, Buck.
This is George.
Hi, George. Just want to say welcome back to Whistleblower Nation. Again, we're here with George Webb. So anyways, we were just getting into a little bit about, the families, some of the power elite, and that's when we dropped off for the messages. So I guess we should pick up where we left off.
Yeah, well, I'm not, the New York Times and CNN and Washington Post all tend to call me a conspiracy theorist, a right-wing one, and that's funny because I would have given money to Bernie 5 times and gone to Bernie telethons and all that if I'd have known I was a right-wing conspiracy theorist. But there is this provision of NDAA, and I spend a lot of time, talking to people actually doing the periods and commas in the bill, trying to do the reconciliation between the House bill that just passed and the Senate bill that just passed, Senate more recently. And there is a provision within NDAA, which I think everybody knows about, which is called Smith-Mundt, M-U-N-T. Some of the people remember those Bundt cakes, B-U-N-T-E or B-U-N-T-D-T. This is M-U-N-D-T, Smith-Mundt. But Smith-Mundt was called the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act of 2012. But what it really does, it didn't modernize anything. Smith-Mundt basically was a provision saying the DOD can't lie to you. The DOD can't set up a television network like CNN and then just lie and come out with scripted news. That's not legal. And Smith-Mundt modernization basically says, oh yeah, it is. So you can create, if you want, a Vegas shooting and say whatever you like. If you wanted to get rid of a whole bunch of witnesses for something else, you could say it was some lone gunman. All bets are off, with the DNC, with Guccifer saying he hacked in emails, fine. Really anything. Seth Rich, yeah, sure. no problem. Anything can be what I call a school play, which is, we have 4 or 5 people say a few lines, poor press believes it, films it, moves on. Most of the press isn't compliant or anything like that. They just don't know any better. They're all a bunch of kids that are told, that come here with journalism degrees, that are told, hey, you're amazing, gosh, you're just amazing, and they get to ride on the presidential plane and, get to, say hi and hobnob. And they think that what they're reporting is truth. They don't realize it's all a pack of lies. So one of the things I try to do is the last chance our society has of being a free society is the First Amendment, the freedom of the press, and obviously freedom of speech as by extension. And so I take my whole waking day to try to put out the word about Smith Mud and the fact that this is propaganda. This is what we fought against Soviet Union for. It was because this is the last amendment. I think the amendments, the Bill of Rights, are in the order of importance, and this is the last bastion, the First Amendment.
Yep. People have to defend our Bill of Rights and our, and our Constitution, and so you're taking the ball and you're running with it, and it's really important that everyone does this. Everyone needs to fight for everything that this government stands for, and just the suppression of real news is a scary place to be. And there's to me, I watch the news and I'm like, well, what are they not? Why is this story going on? So we don't focus on what story should we be paying attention to? So it's a really tough thing. What do you think about all this nuclear stuff going on in the world? Do you have an opinion on that? I'm sure you do.
Well, I don't really cover the nuclear beat too much, other than the fuel that's used, the nuclear weapons grade uranium, and where it's manufactured, and that whole kind of life cycle. So I do spend a lot of time looking into that. I'm by no means an expert in that area, but I do look at a lot of where it's mined and where it's refined and all that. What I can tell you is that these rogue nations, it used to be Libya as a rogue nation, then used to be Iraq was a rogue nation, and then now North Korea is a rogue nation. These are areas or areas of development that you would be surprised our American intelligence services are quite involved with. If you want to have a experiment with technology that's not socially acceptable in your own country, you have a rogue nation do it. So you can have a rogue nation. All these missile tests by North Korea could very easily be, again, Smith Mundt. I don't have to tell you the truth. They could be basically our own operations under the guise of, that old Kim Jong-il or whatever his name is. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying he is or isn't doing that. But for years, Pakistan and India and China have used North Korea as kind of this places where there are no rules because they don't want any rules to do different types of nuclear testing. I'm not an expert in that technology, so I really don't know. But right. Trump kind of calls a bluff and says, well, I'm going to just decimate it. And that's exactly what the military industrial complex doesn't want to do, because those are all their experiments. That's their laboratory. And for everybody, not just the U.S., but I think it's also for China and also for Pakistan, also for India, particularly for their space program and nuclear or the payload, not the payload part, but the propulsion system part. And they want to keep it that way. Now, they want to scare Trump. They want to see if Trump's going to back down. And Trump says, no, I'm going to go in. If we're going to go in, we're going to go in full force and destroy everything until, it's a cinder. And they just don't know how to control Trump yet. He's still got a little bit of a wild card nature to him, where everything they try seems to backfire so far. He's pretty surrounded, though. That's this batch of generals that all, kind of came up together.
Well, since we're talking about Trump briefly here, what has he done that you approve of? I mean, what have you seen? What changes has he tried to initiate? What kudos do you want to give him?
I think he did a good job. I mean, he's I think tried to help a little bit with what I'm doing, which is aspiring. If you have aspiring in Congress, right? And everyone's afraid to vote. They're conscious because they're afraid of being blackmailed because of something they said in the letter. It really takes the power and the creativity out of the people's house. I mean, if you have that, basically all of our representatives, by extension, we're all powerless. We've all been made powerless by a group of 6 Pakistani guys, or 5 Pakistani guys and the one wife. So it's in terms of Pakistani ISI, it's a great move because it disempowers the whole United States in one move. Trump has tried, I think, a little to help. He hasn't helped me a lot yet. He hasn't helped the other people that are trying to get rid of the spying in Congress. But Bannon, I think, was a good move. I think he's pushed McMaster out a little bit. He realizes McMaster's a spy, so he's kind of pushing McMaster's out a little bit. McMaster's is over there ordering up all these wiretaps of the Trump people through Susan Rice and Samantha Power. I mean, that's like you having. I don't want to say Benedict Arnold because I kind of think he's an American hero, but it's almost like having your worst enemy as your chief of staff. Now, I know McMaster's not the chief of staff, Kelly is, but Kelly is not much better with a leaky phone. It's like, oops, I did it again. I gave away the president's schedule for today again, so they know what rooms to bug. So, I think Trump. Bannon's been thrown out. The other guy that kind of was kind of the same opinions got thrown out. I can't remember his name right now, Wheelman or whatever his name is, Wheeler. And Trump's losing people left and right, but still Trump somehow is still maintaining a balance where he hasn't been knocked off balance yet. I think the things with his tweeting, if that's the one thing that he's done that has fought the military-industrial complex and this whole arms machine in Congress. Everybody says they hate his tweets. The social stuff he does is not very smart, but the stuff he does about fake news and CNN, that's right on the money. He needs to do more of that. As a matter of fact, that's the number one best thing I think he's done is talked about CNN being fake news, because it is.
Yeah, he's definitely outspoken. When he has a thought about something, he definitely shares that information. I myself am a Democrat, but I always want to see. I thought, well, he's definitely like the punk rock of politicians. He doesn't really back down. He has his own mind, and maybe something will happen. I know that we were due for a little bit of a shakeup, so I'm just hoping everything will, in the end, that there'll be some, changes made. And I have these deep concerns with the deep state and with these agencies, these alphabet agencies and what's going on. And it's just frightening. So, and I thought, well, he is starting to shake that up a little bit and, firing people and hiring people. So, I was hoping that would result in some serious changes of what's going on as far as the surveillance state and some of these deeper programs going on. And so we'll just have to see how it all happens.
Yeah. Well, Flynn was a good choice for that. Unfortunately, they not got it. It's one of those things in this thing, and they either get rid of you first, or you're gotten rid of, right, in the spy business. So they tend to act quickly, and they got rid of Flynn, and that really hurt him badly. He didn't get rid of McCabe, which just completely, I cannot imagine how you would have a Judas like that in your, as one of the House guards. So it just remains to be seen. This Ray that came in was no better. He's like Mueller and Comey. So I just don't know how you can run a country with so many people against you. And these are people with powerful tools, powerful hacking tools, powerful eavesdropping tools, all kinds of human intelligence, 40,000 agents, files on everybody, all the conversations on everybody, incredible capability with surveillance, satellite, plane, train, everything. It's just like, if that guy's against you, how do you win? But somehow he still manages. I don't know how he does it. Actually, he's done a good job just of still being there, I think. Yeah.
I agree. What do you think? What do you think? Like, if it was your perfect world, what would have to happen? Like, say you 10 years down the road and you've got some things to change and it's your world, George. What do you think is going to have to happen to get our country back on track, to take over for the American people to have their own country back?
Well, I just had my 57th birthday. I never planned beyond lunch the next day because I never I have to expect not to have lunch. So I'll bring it down to what would I do tomorrow. I mean, Mattis. Mattis, I've heard a lot of good things. And if Mattis decides to build a secure intelligence command post around Trump, and he could get somebody like Dunford, who he knows, who's the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and just say, look, guys, we're not going to run it like it used to be. The elites are just running rampant with the drug overdoses, the opiate targeting. We've had shipments, and the numbers bear all these things out. I work with a group of intelligence professionals talking about 120 square miles in Afghanistan and Pakistan under opium production now. We've had record opiate deaths. We've got to get McMaster, somebody to establish a command center and say, look, we gotta get off this drugs for weapons thing all over the world with ISIS. We got to get off that. Let's go back to the days, a little bit of organ harvesting here, a little bit of child trafficking there, a little bit of arms for drugs there, but let's get back to a reasonable business, not this, it's almost like 20s or almost like the 2000 buying frenzy with the internet stocks, the .com bubble, we've got a .bomb bubble, and we're just killing so many people. And the people that are being targeted in the deplorables list, aren't the 3 million terrorists by DHS. They're the 3 million people that went to a rally, a Ron Paul rally. Those are the people that are being targeted, and that's got to stop. We've got to take the National Terrorism Watch list, the 3 million people on that list, and expose that list. Let people each openly challenge why are they on that list. Sort of like what happened when the East Germany fell in 1989, and the East German intelligence services, they opened up all the files. And people went in there. This is right off the Spree in Berlin. I've been to this. Now it's a museum. And they saw these files, and just this files as far as you can see. And then people would go in there and they could look to see if they had a file, and they couldn't believe it. They remember making fun of their neighbor for saying that there was a file on them. And they'd pull out their file, and it'd be as thick as a New York phone book. And then they'd start reading it, and they'd say, what? They really cared about what school play I went to when I was 11 years old, because they sang some kind of communist song. The things that people pulled out of their file, they couldn't believe. So we need a national sunlight first on the whole collection program, the Collect It All program that NSA has been doing. Mm-hmm. We need to completely dismantle these fusion centers, these DHS fusion centers, which basically are you integrate all these law enforcement agencies and then you infiltrate all the law enforcement. You got to get rid of that. It's a huge octopus. So just removing things, you don't even have to do anything positive. Just remove all the negative things, and things are going to be better. Just with sunlight, natural sunshine is all you need. Just natural sunshine is all you need to solve most of the problems. Just remove things. Don't even add to the budget. Reduce the budget. DHS should be eliminated, completely eliminated. The Office of Defense and National Intelligence, completely eliminated. Completely redo the CIA. Get rid of the JTTF and the FBI, and you're good to go. I mean, you got 90% of the problems. Then you can start arguing about what the other 10% is. Right.
Yeah, it sounds like a good plan. And, I agree, too, this thing with DHS, and it's just there's so many unnecessary agencies, and it's just all about pumping in the money. So it's crazy. I remember I was looking at this video. Are you familiar with Kevin Shipp?
I've heard so much about him. I know everybody says, you should listen to Kevin Shipp.
You should. I was going to say that. You should listen to Kevin Shipp. He's actually got a great one on YouTube with Dane Wigington at a conference, and he discusses the shadow government, the deep state, and he seems to know a lot of information, being that he's from the other, he was inside. He's definitely worth looking into, especially you with the mindset you have and your objective and what you do. I think he's right up your alley. And he has a wonderful book, and I hope I don't paraphrase it, In the Company Company of Shadows. From what I understand, it's an excellent book, and I've yet to really sit down and read the whole thing in its entirety. But everyone around me who's read it just loves it and finds it extremely informative, and it's informative. He has a lot of information that we as outsiders, not part of the intelligence agencies, can get our hands on. So, yeah, definitely something to think of. And he talks about all these, agencies. I mean, hundreds of them. These, little private agencies. So, sounds like a good plan. I have to say.
That I've talked about that as well. These basically they're what I call them. They're G4S contractors, private security firms. I think there's about 10,000 of them now. But Dana Priest did a piece in the Washington Post back when the Washington Post did articles, and it was 2010 Pulitzer Prize, and it was called Top Secret America. The number of these private agencies, these are private agencies that are doing human intelligence and human surveillance and harassment. Private agencies that are anointed by, guys like Evan McMullen in Utah. So the problem is we've gotten away from sworn officers, G-men, the old G-men, to these private agencies that we've hired. This whole Prison Inc. Kind of concept where we're going to attack the rank and file people through police forces and private agencies, and then start them through this Prison Inc. kind of pipeline. So it sounds like we say a lot of the same things. I've tried to meet him. I said, is he in D.C.? I've tried to meet him several times. I don't know where he lives, but I'd love to meet him.
I'll put you in contact with him or share your information with one another, after the call. But I noticed that I was looking through the notes that I'd taken from from when he spoke. I think he said there's 10,000 secret sites in the U.S. since 9/11, and there's 4,271 secret agencies within the U.S. So, and then he's talking about 854,000 people have top security clearances. Wait a minute. Yeah. That's not true. Hold on. 4,800,000 people with security clearances. That's ridiculous.
I thought it was higher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what he said. So I'm going to have to connect you guys.
There's a program creatively called The Program, which is kind of a surveillance harassment, which is very similar to the program that I described in Eastern Europe. And the problem is that it is a secret program. So the more people you read in, they call it reading into the program. When they read you into the program, you got to give these people clearances. And these people aren't the, comey, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, federal agent. These are folks that a lot of them have committed crimes. They're working off time. A lot of them are addicted to drugs, and that's how they are recruited. A lot of them are, good people as well, private security firms thinking they're doing the right thing. But by the way you manage them, you can make think someone's a target. You can make people think I'm a horrible person by just taking every negative thing I've ever done and playing it in a 10-second reel for somebody right before they go out to, harass me, right? So that's kind of what's being done. And so I definitely need to talk to him. I'm looking forward to it. And The Company of Shadows, that sounds like a great book.
Yeah, definitely. I would highly suggest it. So yeah, I look forward to trying to connect you guys. He's a very... he seems like he's just a real gentleman. So yeah, I look forward to doing that. And then what other areas can we talk about? We still have about 30 more minutes. What I'm going to do is, if anybody wants to call in and ask George a question, the number, it may or may not be working. We're having issues with the call in for questions line. It's 229. This is just for today. 229-299-5360. Again, the number is 229-299-5360 if you want to present a question to George. You can also join us by Skype. You can connect to the producer. It's Amad Painter, AMADPAINTER on Skype, and we'll bring you in for a question. So while we're waiting to see if we get any questions or we can get him to go through, what about some of the biggest contractors in the, well, it's kind of jumping around. Yeah, I guess we can go into this. The military-industrial complex, which we were discussing, like some of the, General Dynamics. You have Boeing and Northrop Grumman, I think is how you say it, GE. What do you know about those companies? And
well, one of the big mistakes that we did, Alan Dulles, the first director of the Central Intelligence Agency, he really grew up, as a Yale kid. He grew up all those other Yaleys, and he, when he got control of the agency, he had been, OSS, and basically, I don't want to say, traded all the art of most of the Jews that ended up dying in concentration camps, and trafficked that art through people like George Soros and a whole bunch of other minions, to another group of very wealthy folks that, so that was, he never ever worked for the American people. He was always interested in the elites. He just this constant concept of elitism in his going through his thing. So when he became director of Central Intelligence, he really thought, I need to have this power elite around me, and I always want to be talking to some leader of GE or whatever. And if they're not elite, or if they're not the leader in their businesses, I want them to be elite, in 10 years. So if you look at all these companies, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, you want to look at General Dynamics, you want to some reason I can't remember.
Some. Booz Allen. I forgot about Booz Allen and Raytheon.
Raytheon. All these companies. It was by hook or by crook that these companies have been successful. McDonnell Douglas, all these companies. There were other more successful companies that were targeted, and then these companies then purchased them in mergers, which are really forced takeovers to become who they are today. All of them, across the board, Lockheed, et cetera. So, Raytheon being the cruise missiles. So the history in the arms industry is one of this kind of spy ring coming from, Allen Dulles brought this spy ring from Nazi Germany, 135 guys here in Fort Hunt, just not too far from Mount Vernon, actually, very close to Mount Vernon, southern Fairfax County. And, they ended up going into NASA. The idea was, we're behind the Russians in the space race. We've got to bring in all these people, called Operation Paperclip. And I've interviewed the guy Kennedy hired to break this spy ring up, into 1,000 pieces before his murder and death, and at a very young age. So I'm very close to this here. I'm close to his son. I've talked to his son quite a bit. And this is really where they said the Nazi, where Hitler used to say there were 7 guys sitting around a table, and that's how we started this thing. We just weren't afraid to kill anybody to get ahead, to take control. And this infiltration, we'll get a person in there, we'll get information, we'll send in a second person, then a third person, then all of a sudden all things start going wrong in the organization or group, and then finally we'll kill the leader and we'll take it over. It's a lot easier to do that, sort of like a virus or whatever, than it is to build something on your own. And if you look at the defense industry in the United States, that's exactly the story of the defense industry. None of the original founders, none of the original pioneers were the actual people who ended up benefiting. It was all these people that were these infiltrators. And generation after generation, it's just feeding on the, giving the fruits to the children now. And it's a very inside cliquey game. And every once in a while, there's somebody who pops up with some innovation. But one of the quickest ways to die in America is come up with a great invention in the defense industry. I mean, it's hazardous to your health, and especially in defense, they feel like there's all, they feel like if it's not in our hands and we don't control it, then there's going to be where national security is at risk. So it's a group that's completely convinced that they know exactly the right thing for America, and if that fell into the hands of the wrong person, could be real trouble for our national security. So we need to get rid of them. Now, sometimes it's causing a brain aneurysm or just a car accident or something, not murder, but just check out the history of the defense industry. It's checkered with hook and crook. I mean, it's not a pretty picture. Booz Allen's the worst by far. Booz Allen's the worst by far. Booz Allen is exactly what I said before. Booz Allen is one of those agencies that hires all these private firms, and a lot of them have this religious overtone to them. The LDS Church is a great church, Mormon church, but then there's this really super radical, violent sect that still believes in polygamy. They're called FLDS. They have nothing to do with each other, but FLDS is the fundamentalists. LDS church. And they've got this, still, hey, it's okay to kill the guy and take the wife and take the cow and take the farm because we're, anointed in some way. I mean, these are people that, keep girls, off in the cloisters, off on these farms and so forth. They're nasty. These are not the people that you want running your national security agency. And Booz Allen, unfortunately, has a lot of FLDS, the Evan McMullen types, at the top, the very top of the organizations. Very scary people. So at Booz Allen, I would save my worst criticism. I'd say for Booz Allen. And by the way, they have all your phone calls in Bluffdale, Utah, Bluffdale, Utah. All your phone calls, all your texts, all your videos, everything about you, Booz Allen in Bluffdale, Utah. A comforting feeling. And it really is this FLDS. It's this wacky. It's almost kind of as wacky as the Masons here in Virginia. With this secret society and, all these secret handshakes and all this crap. And, sometimes the brick is out of line and we got to, tap the brick back in line, weird stuff. I mean, and it's at the highest levels. It's only in the defense industry, which is strange. But it's at the highest levels, and it's at the highest levels of the CIA. Which is scary. Like Mike Pompeo's a nice guy. He's kind of a congressman that they put in there to front this thing, but that's not who runs the CIA. I can guarantee you.
Yeah.
No calls yet,
well,
huh?
Thanks. No, I was just asking about that. I think there's issues.
We're not doing well.
Well, I know this has been a tough call, but the problem is the past few weeks, I only started doing this maybe a month and a week or so ago, and something happened where the call-ins weren't working. So you really, it's not even that someone's not calling in, it's just they can't get through. So hopefully that's going to get worked out as well.
Is this getting out even on the internet? There's a chat room. Are there people in the chat room?
Yeah, there's people in the chat room. I'm getting text messages. Yeah, so they're listening. There's people listening.
Okay.
And then hopefully my incredible friend will be able to kind of fix it up and spruce it up after all the interruptions. So that's what I'm hoping. Yeah. So, okay, so we just have a little bit more time here. Well, I was hoping we get some questions in. If somebody wants to join Skype, you can. And again, the number, if you want to call in, hopefully it'll work. It hasn't yet, but maybe it'll start working today. 229-299-5360. Or you can text me if you have my phone number. Feel free to text, and I can ask them questions that way. So what other areas should we go into? Like I said, we have just a little bit more time.
Well, I don't, this is kind of funny because I started on secret societies, and I don't believe in any of the hooey about, Illuminati and special rings and stuff. Yeah, the Masons have their rings and everything. But, Grant kind of railed against secret societies after the Civil War because all these federal contractors were like, hey, we made some really good money on this war. We want to keep it going. And he's like, hey, we got to kind of back down on this stuff. Well, instead of stopping, they just created these secret societies. And these Masons, especially here in Virginia, kind of came up in 1870, 1871. And I realized they were, Washington was a Freemason and all that. But I'm saying when it started being used for this kind of what I would call defense contracting, these secret rings to say, well, if somebody, we really know best. We're the circle of wisdom. I don't know if you've seen the movie Eyes Wide Shut or anything, but there's always rituals to convince. Yeah, to convince each other that they're the smartest guys in the world or anointed somehow. And then they make these decisions about people. These folders come across the table, and then they don't use anybody's real name, and they make big, black, X's through people, and sound a drum or a gong, gong, and then they have, some candle being lit somewhere, it's this ridiculous ritual around trying to give legitimacy to their ridiculous decisions that they make about people. But the real life consequences are very real. People die and or get in car accidents, lots of accidents. And this is the way the defense industry has been run, basically since the end of the Civil War, since 1871, especially here in Washington, D.C., especially with this kind of Northern Virginia crew. And I don't, every once in a while a movie's done. I think Tom Hanks did a movie kind of on this. It was kind of a follow-up to Da Vinci Code, and I can't remember the name of it right now. Trying to, figure out what all these Masonic
Angels
symbols
and Demons? I'm not sure. I can't remember what it was. I thought it was Angels and Demons, but yeah.
Could be Angels and Demons. Anyway, I should remember it. But, and in no way am I conspiracy theorist or I think there's anything significant or satanic or anything about any of these things. This is a bunch of guys dressing up in robes trying to convince each other that they know more than anybody else.
Right.
And they can do horrible crimes because they can light candles, But that's what it is. And Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, said, hey, we got to get away from this secret society stuff. Well, the only other president to ever really address this was John F. Kennedy, saying, hey, this is not democracy. This is not sunshine. Secret societies are secret for only one reason. They're doing illegal crap in there, right? Otherwise, they'd be opened, right? So, and people talk about the Masons and the first 33 degrees of Masons, and those are all basically little trials and tests of will you do something for the society versus doing what you've been taught all your life about the Constitution, about, 3 branches of government, blah, blah, blah. And, for instance, you're an undertaker, and you're a Masonic undertaker. If I show up here with a body in the back, will you burn it within the hour so there's no evidence, no questions asked? Now, that's not necessarily, you don't know where that body came from, right? But do you do it or don't you? I don't know. Is that a 21-degree Mason? Is that an 18-degree Mason? That should be open. That should be published. It should be saying, here's what you got to do. Burn a body within 1 hour that shows up in your back door. I'm a Masonic undertaker. Okay, that's level 21. Okay, great. Now we all know. But none of us know because it's secret. And the CIA, unfortunately, went around and contracted with a lot of these people, these kind of Masonic undertakers in the United States in the 50s and 60s. To get rid of people after they had, if they got in the way. And this kind of ties into the defense industry as well. People just disappear. And this isn't a good way to run the society. This is a secret thing. And I never believed this. I thought it was total conspiracy theory until I moved to Washington, D.C. and saw it firsthand. There's these reminders everywhere you go, these all-seeing eyes. It really is quite funny, reminding you that, hey, your secret bond, your secret blood oath that you made with your society is more important than anything else in the world. And our obligation is to kill you if you ever violate that agreement. Well, how are you ever going to get anything done in Congress? How, if there's always some secret oath that you've taken, that takes you in a different direction, it really does have its effect in this town. And I know people think that's going to sound so conspiratorial, and I never would have believed it unless I would have lived the last 3 months in Washington, D.C., but it's a pervasive kind of thing. It's a pervasive thing. If you make a decision that's out of line, the whole idea of the Masons, right, is if a brick is out of line, it ruins the whole look of the building, right? So the Mason has to be the guy who takes out that bad brick and puts in, another one. If you believe that, you're limited. Your scope of operations is tremendously limited. If you think there's some secret society that's going to come in and, put my kids in a car accident or me in a car accident, it's very pervasive in Washington, D.C. And people would have to come here and live here to really feel that. And I haven't talked much about that in my videos because it sounds too conspiratorial, but it's something
for sake
that you
of
really
credibility,
Yeah, for sake of credibility, I don't talk about this. But because people hit you with a CT label immediately when you start talking about this, you're like, oh, yeah, Illuminati, whatever. But it is real. I mean, did I go out to a shop and buy the Masonic ring? Did I develop the secret handshake? Did I have these secret meetings where there's 12 guys in robes and not showing their face to decide if you get to the next level? I mean, it reminded me so much. I was a Kappa Alpha. Stop me when I'm talking too much. Which is a fraternity that came out of the South and the Confederate spy services. And I went through all this ritual stuff and everybody in hoods and everything. And I thought I was just getting into a new fraternity. And all of a sudden I was like, God, this seems like the Ku Klux Klan I'm getting into here. And I went through it just out of curiosity. But all these secret handshakes and secret rings and everything, and then the blood oath and the trial of fire and the trial of water and, the burning of incense. And what they're trying to do is put you through near-death experiences and then burn incense with that, like the feeling of being waterboarded, trial of water, or the fear of, having your feet put to the fire, trial of fire. And then you're smelling this acrid smell at the same time. And that's, to forever put the fear of death in you every time you smell that smell again, even if the fire isn't there and the water isn't there, right?
Right.
So that's why they burn these incense every month, when they're, it's just like, remember, we're going to kill you to get out of line. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but, Frank Church, 56 years old, he has the church committee, and then he's dead 2 years later. The CIA does know how to cancer you. And there's a million different ways. Like Chuck Schumer says, there's 6 different ways to Sundays the CIA can get rid of you. And it really does pervade that whole pallor or shadow pervades over Washington, D.C., especially if you're in the defense industry. I just feel it. I feel it in the pressure of the senators, so forth. It's just this all pervasive kind of threat. It's not a good thing.
Yeah. Doesn't sound like it. Yeah, and it is. I know that I understand that there's this undertone of that. And I have a couple of friends who live in DC, and they try to convey to me that feeling that you're explaining. So I do have a question from the producer. Do you want to come in and ask your question, Ahmad?
What do you think about all these people in the Senate that have dual citizenship? Isn't that kind of anti-American or patriotic, or actually I think it should be legal?
Yeah. Well, I'm Jewish, but I will say this, that holding an Israeli passport and a U.S. passport is ridiculous. You should, especially if you're in government. Now, you can have that if you're a business person. That's no problem. But that's if the U.S. decides and Congress writes that law. But if you're going to be a congressperson, a senator, or a House member, or in the executive branch at a high level cabinet, having both passports is ridiculous. You have to declare your allegiance to one country or the other. Now, I have no problem with someone saying, "Hey, I feel very strongly about Israel, and I'm gonna, I'm gonna go over there and be president over there." Avi Braverman, one of my favorite, politicians over there, great, but not in the United States, because it brings up exactly what you said. It's a question now between your loyalty to Israel or your loyalty to the United States. Your loyalty to, what if we had somebody like that for Pakistan or for Russia or, Libya or wherever? It just brings, I think, too many things into question, too much loyalty problems into question. And a lot of the folks that got us into this trouble with us and Juan Spiring have dual citizenship. Debbie Wasserman Schultz and then Jackie Spear, I believe, has got a dual citizenship. I don't know if Deutsch has dual citizenship or not, but a lot of the people end up hiring this Spiring end up with Israeli passports, which really troubles me as I wanted my son to go to fight in the IDF. I wanted my daughter, neither one did. So I'm very pro-Israel. I'm not pro-Zionist. Like, I don't think Israel should expand. But I do think it's a very bad sign when you've got people hiring Spirings in Congress that have dual citizenships, because it just makes Israel look bad. So anyway.
Well, thanks for answering that question. I appreciate it. Do you have any other questions, Ahmad?
I just thought it was kind of strange. I wasn't necessarily talking about Israel in general. I know there's several other that have with South Africa, I believe, and I'm not really up on the government stuff so much, but I just thought that was a question kind of pertinent to the secret societies, because really that's a society that's not secret, but it's still a society within a society.
Yeah,
I think you're... Go ahead.
No, it's okay, George. Go ahead.
this is fair. I mean, I don't know if Anthony Weiner was a dual citizen or not, but, he was very close with Ehud Barak, of the Israeli foreign minister, and at some point you go, come on, Anthony, I mean, this is pretty bad. Chuck Schumer, I don't know if he's a dual citizen or not, but it just brings up, it just levels us and exposes us to a whole set of legitimate criticism. And I think I think we're doing the worst service for ourselves as Israelis. I'm not an Israeli citizen. I'm not a dual citizen, but it just opens ourselves up to criticism. And I think you should say, look, I'm going to let my Israeli passport go, because I want to be a senator from New York, and just go from there.
George, there are people, like there are organizations and structures within the government where you can't even be married to a Canadian citizen. So it's interesting, this kind of double standard throughout the government.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Ted Cruz is a dual citizen of Canada and the U.S. or not. But in Australia, when I lived there for a couple of years as a permanent resident, they said you have a choice now. They used to allow dual citizenship with Australia, but they said there's a choice. You choose one or the other after 5 years. And I think that's really where it should be. You should be able to have a visa with one and a passport with the other, and then after 5 years, if you get the passport, you give up the other one. We've got the spy ring here. Same situation. All of them have Pakistani passports as well as U.S. passports. At least in open court, I saw a U.S. passport from one of the spies. I was told that the other one was a U.S. citizen. So now our whole spy ring here in Congress with the 6 Pakistanis have at least Pakistani passports as well as U.S. passports. Now, what sense is that for people that have all the passports of all the representatives in Congress, at least in the House? If people who have a son or daughter that's having a drug problem after having come back from service in Afghanistan or Iraq, and they send their congressman a heartfelt letter about how their son can't get help from the VA because they're having PTSD issues about their raids that they did and the horrors, that happened over there. And now that email is in the hands of a Pakistani guy working 3 months out of the year, transferring terabytes of information and hundreds of illegal money transfers. That email is sitting in Pakistan. I just don't see. We create these situations for ourselves by when Debbie Wasserman Schultz brought him in. We created that situation for ourselves. We only have ourselves to blame for the situation. I'm speaking about U.S.-Israeli citizens now. We only have ourselves to blame. Why would we ever do that? Why would we put somebody with a Pakistani passport and a U.S. passport, dual citizen, into managing all the passwords of people in Congress? It doesn't make any sense. And now we know from the Senate, the House Inspector General report that terabytes were transferred to Pakistan, and he lived there 3 months a year. So we really have to think twice about our policies.
Yeah, definitely.
Isn't all the information from the CIA databased in Israel?
Well, we can't talk about that. Well, yeah, that's true. At Verizon, if you go to the court, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to go ahead because I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm not an Israeli citizen. Yeah, you're right. The trunks, the major trunk, as a matter of fact, going into Verizon, the Verizon building on 42nd Street and the Avenue of the Americas, that's where most of the tap is. There's some kind of like agreement, cockamamie agreement between Mossad and CIA that says, if they call it data sharing, but Israel's collection is about 0.1% of what the U.S.'s collection is. Same thing for what they call the Five Eyes. The Five Eyes being United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. They all have eyedropper contributions to the total intelligence pool, and the U.S. is much greater. But those agencies are basically just extensions of the CIA anyway. So, but there's data sharing agreements with all those as well, the Five Eyes. So yeah, you really just need somebody like a Mike Flynn to go in and go, okay, here's how we're going to do it, guys. We're going to do it the right way. And it's unfortunate that Mike Flynn got blackballed because he was completely innocent through illegal surveillance. if I was Trump, my next move tomorrow would be to reinstate Mike Flynn.
Sounds like a good move. Okay, so
or hire Kevin Shipp. Like it sounds like, yeah.
Kevin Shipp, yeah, I agree. Kevin Shipp, that he'd be excellent. So I guess there are people having some issues trying to call in. I guess one here, a dear friend of mine who actually is familiar with Kevin Shipp and she read his whole book, and she said that she's curious about. She wanted your opinion on the SEC 702 renewal. I'm not familiar. I hope I didn't say that. I hope I said it correctly. If there is hope to end.
I think when she's saying 702,
it's tough because she tried to call in, but she got a fax tone, so she wasn't able to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was called the 777, but anyway, there is this provision that the CIA collects it, or basically NSA is just an extension of CIA. CIA, when it just gets too big, it just divides and changes the nameplate. I mean, that's how that works. But NSA is a gigantic agency, obviously, in Fort Meade. And anyway, they have a collected all provision, which says I'm going to go ahead and collect everything, like all the trunk lines, everything, your phone calls and so forth. But that's not illegal collection. Normally, you'd need a warrant, a FISA warrant, Foreign Intelligence Services Court warrant. No, what it is if we open the file. So we're going to go ahead and put it on the database. We're going to go ahead and put it on the server, and then it's not actually looking at it until we get the FISA warrant. Well, unfortunately, there's this thing called the liaison loophole. The liaison loophole means that if another foreign intelligence agency, like one of the Five Eyes that I was talking about, decides to do an operation in the U.S., they don't need permission. They can go ahead and just look at the file. So basically, I just use the Five Eyes company as my eyes and ears to come in to the United States. And that's exactly what has happened with MI6, with the British intelligence, with CSIS in Canada, and to a lesser extent, Australia and New Zealand. But basically, they can look at the stuff, process it, make intelligence decisions off of it, and then feed it back to the CIA. And that's exactly what Pakistani ISI is doing. The whole operation, the whole spying operation on Congress is a liaison loophole operation. McCabe of the FBI is using this little group, and has for the last 20 years, this group of 6 that I've been talking about, for this liaison operation to look at these records. So this is how Michael Flynn got illegally surveilled, and a couple of other people. Paul Manafort was illegally surveilled. They do a parallel construction later on. If they find dirt, they do a parallel construction later on, and then Mike McMaster sends an email over to Susan Rice saying, "Hey, let's look at so-and-so's file." But believe me, everybody's files being looked at continuously by these foreign intelligence agencies because there's this loophole and this liaison loophole. And when they find dirt, then they throw it over to McMaster, and McMaster writes a little BlackBerry message to Susan Rice, and they say, "Oh, Mike Flynn, we found that you got $500,000 for your consulting project in Turkey," and that's how that worked. So, I mean, that's illegal. I mean, the dirt they got on Mike Flynn is illegal. That's illegal surveillance, and people should be, called to task for that. They had a little bit of a show where they put, Susan Rice up there for a day, closed questioning. I don't even think it was open. The judiciary had an open hearing for that. Trump's got his work cut out for him. It's pretty stacked against you. Now, I tend to be the guy who says, okay, well, if there's a huge castle wall, then build a glider and fly over it. So I always am thinking out new ways of getting around all these walls. But Mike Flynn, that situation needs to be rectified.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering that question. I have one last question before we finish up here. What's your opinion about criminal networks working with government networks? Do you think they're involved with one another?
Yes, mainly local law enforcement. And what happens is these they call them prowler teams, or CIA used to call them red teams, and they're typically done around very extremist religious groups. So if you can imagine, let's say here in Washington, you go to Fairfax County, right? or the DC Police or Capitol Police, and you find 5 or 6 guys that will put on the robes with you and burn the incense and all that. We're going to say, how we're going to get rid of the blabbermouths or the talkers or the people that don't quite fit in. And you make these little cabals, these little agreements where you think you know better than everyone else. And then you get funding. This police officer gets to do these night raids, and believe me, there's very sophisticated technology for doing night raids. And you hire your security company, and you get 12 or 15 different family members to, be a part of your security company, and they earn $25 an hour sitting in a car looking at a house. And that's the way it works. I mean, this is what Kevin Shipp's talking about. This is exactly what he's talking about. There are all these independent little private security firms that are these retired cops. These guys retire at the age of 50, right? And they run these little security firms, and they all go to these, Masons meetings and smell incense and convince themselves that what they just did was right. That this is the number one problem in America. I don't think that this problem, it started with JTTF in the early 90s, maybe go back to 84 with Bush, but it is out of control now. We got so many people on these private security teams. It's amazing. And again, these are people who get money when they get something on you, when they get dirt on you. Right.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of justice and probable cause and, Miranda rights and everything, it's all out of the window. You're God's messenger right now to take this brick that's out of place and put the new brick in to make it all nice and square. That's what you think you're doing. And this is a real problem. This is a real problem.
Yeah, it really seems to be pervasive just everywhere. Well, thank you. I know you're trying to put the bricks in the right place, and so I appreciate you so much. You're just a wealth of information. You seem to be such an incredible human being, and thanks for coming on. I think we have maybe another minute or two. If things are working properly, we should hear what do you think, Ahmad? How are we doing?
It's about 2 minutes.
2 more minutes. Okay. So I guess we could wrap it up a little bit. I'm trying to think. We kind of discussed about what should happen. What do you want to do? How do you want to wrap it up?
I would say this. If people go to my channel, and I put together a series, there's 1,200 videos, right? I put together a series called a super summary. Start by watching that. It's only 6 videos. It came in
sooner, George. I'm so sorry. It came in. So let's just go give your YouTube channel, your website.
George Webb. Just look George Webb on YouTube.
Great. And then also you have a website and...
No, just YouTube.
Just YouTube. Okay. Well, thank you again, George, and, appreciate it very much.
We'll do it again.
Thanks, George.
Stuff like that. They'll kind of take the news of the day and just kind of read the news, giving it a little bit of a bent, whatever the news might be. And what I tend to do is focus in on pay to play. So I focus in on corruption, and specifically national corruption, national security, national pay to play. And so that really narrows down my focus, and it's much more complex fraud than, covering the local bank robbery and so forth. Mm-hmm. So my videos tend to follow up and chain together. There's usually continuity between all the videos in one day. I might do 2 or 3 minute videos in one day, and they all kind of chain together. So that's why I have a lot of minutes viewed. I think the last time I looked at it, and I can't. I'm trying to get to it right now. It was in the millions. Yeah, it was like 7. I want to say 7 million viewers and 12 million minutes viewed, something like that. Yeah.
It's interesting, which I was surprised about, because when you were on my other show, a lot of people had heard about you, which I didn't know, and so many people respect you. I've never heard really a negative thing about you. One person thought you were an agent, but whatever, they call everybody an agent. And so, but then, some of the bigger guys, I know a lot of like government whistleblowers and like big powerful people that have worked in the government, and they know who you are. It's like everybody knows this guy. That's amazing, and with great respect too. So
yeah, well, I think, when you work a beat that's very tight, I'm in Washington, D.C. every day. I'm on South Capitol Hill every day. I go to the same restaurants every day. I watch them going into the Capitol, Hill Grill, every day. So, a lot of times I'll, be with 10 or 12 members of Congress, usually the House side, very seldom the Senate side. For one evening, wine and cheese nibbler, and then I'll sit next to a congressman during a baseball game or whatever. I usually meet about one or two, and there's a lot, 435, it's a lot. So, but I do know the beat, and I am around a lot. And just from being around a lot, sometimes you get, you gain expertise that you wouldn't have otherwise have, because I talk to legislative assistants every day, every night. I talk to legislative directors every day. Chief of staff, I talk to them every day.
So,
well, strangely enough, it was to do with an FBI case in Portland, Oregon, called the Christmas tree bomber case.
Yeah, and I'm from Portland, Oregon too, so I am familiar with that.
Yeah. You know the case. And they had taken this kid, and I didn't realize all this at the start. And of course, the government doesn't present this when they first go to trial. But they'd worked with him 3 years, starting before. He was a Somali kid going to Oregon State, good kid. They'd worked with him 3 years, 3 different informants had lived with him. I mean, we're talking long-term entrapment. They'd taken all of his phone calls. They had all these people overseas sending him, one female. There was a love interest with the informant. So it was really an incredible, complex entrapment over a number of years just to get this kid to one night on the Christmas tree lighting ceremony in our main square, Pioneer Square downtown in Portland, to press a cell phone button, right? And he got 30 years. Well, I started unwinding the case and said, who's the guy who ran this thing? Turns out it was our guy, who's the number 2 guy at the FBI right now, Andrew McCabe. And that started, it's almost like a Les Miserables, Javert thing with me. This guy has been on my case now for like 7 years.
Now we are back live.
Hi, so are we back now? Am I live?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. We had a little, this seems like the station had a server or the station crashed, but we're back. That's what matters. So we have George Webb on the line, very, very popular journalist. And also, before we get further into our discussion, you have this very successful YouTube channel, and I think you have like 12 million it's really, you have such a high amount of viewers and listeners. So will you give your statistics on that? Because I know it's really high.
Well, I don't look at it very often, but let me go look at it. So let's see, on YouTube. I think what is a little different about my channel is I don't take the news of the day. A lot of the news readers on YouTube, and they're good. I mean, H.A. Goodman. Right. So, but then I can corroborate that with what's actually being reported, which is completely 180% scheduled and fake. It's amazing, actually, the difference between actually what is real and what is reported. There's no there's no tie between the two, other than the fact that it's on the CNN TV while I'm sitting there, at dinner. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So I know you have all, so I understand it's corruption that you're focusing on. And when we had a conversation a couple of weeks back, I guess you're focusing on Congress right now. Do you want to get into that topic, or do you want to talk a little bit more about, some of the deep state corruption, or kind of the watching of civilians and citizens and dissidents? Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. Well, the key case I'm covering, and I have for the last, 250 days now, is the Awan case. And we just had Representative Steve King come out today, and he's one of the leading conservatives from Iowa 4, which is kind of Ames, Iowa, area, central Iowa. And he said, look, this clan, he called it a clan, these 4 brothers, 1 wife, and friend, who have been all earning $160,000 a year, up on Capitol Hill, that, for no-show jobs or ghost jobs, have also been going to the key guy, Imran Awan, going to Pakistan for 3 months out of the year, transferring terabytes of data to Pakistan, hundreds of suspicious activities in terms of money transfers to Pakistan. Okay. Now, Steve King is the guy who came out today, just a couple of minutes ago, and said that is the least of our worries. These Awans selling secrets to Pakistan and other countries is our greatest concern. It's no longer the $5 or $6 million that they got in fake salaries. It's no longer the $500,000 in equipment they stole. That's our key concern. So the pressure has moved toward Congress they've had kind of a fake hearing, where they have it in the side room and nobody's sworn testimony, and they've had 3 or 4 congressmen come forward. Congressman Jordan from Ohio came forward and asked questions. Congressman Perry, who I'm quite impressed with, I can't remember what state he's from right off the bat, came forward and asked some good Negron, Trishnegron. So if people want to read that, she's done 7 installments, and she's got that Harvard hand, the beautiful prose and all that.
Right.
I will give you my Miami of Ohio, quick and dirty version, which is basically I was a computer sales guy. I sold hardware for a number of years, decades, and I sold software after that for decades, mostly in web and network infrastructure, network analysis. So as far away from journalism as you can get. But as events, every once in a while you stick your nose in the political world, and sometimes you get bit, and just strange stuff, started happening. Small stuff, but just it was almost like I was on a deplorables list. Nothing directed at me, like the whole world against me, but just like weird stuff. Like getting a job offer, and then be sitting in the CEO's office toasting, the new position, and then the next day saying, "Well, we think we're going to go a different direction," stuff like that.
Right, almost like you're blacklisted.
So, yeah, it is sort of a blacklist. And as more I researched it, and I looked into some of the things the Department of Defense had done in Europe, in Germany especially after the Second World War, kind of with the CIA working with the old guys that were in the Nazis, Reinhard Gehlen and so forth. So, right here in Fort Hunt, right here in not far from where I am in DC, right here, it really was a program to, against an entire population called a low intensity conflict or a low intensity operation, which is basically saying we need a losers list, or we need a blacklist, and we need to gradually degrade a certain class of people for whatever reason, for political reasons, for economic reasons, for just because they're undesirable, etc. And
right.
When I'd seen enough of it, 5-6 years of it, I finally said, "Hey, this isn't going to stop. The ending of this isn't good." So that kind of drove me into journalism. I said, "Well, I guess if I'm going to live it, I may as well write about it."
That's right. And here you are. So what was the first thing that you first tried to bring to light, or what was your first area of interest? I'd imagine this whole, whatever was happening to you was of interest, and why?
Revolution Radio! You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Good afternoon and welcome to Whistleblower Nation. I'm your host, Ella Free. In a country where truth is sometimes regarded as treason, I have the utmost respect for people who stand up to injustice. By definition, a whistleblower is a person who makes public disclosures of wrongdoing, corruption, and crime. So this show is, I'm here to celebrate whistleblowers, and that's what this show is all about. So if things worked out okay, we have George Webb on the line. Did we get a chance to pull him in? Let's see, we're trying to get him on the line.
I'm in the process of calling him now.
All right. And if we're unable to reach him, which, let's see.
It just hung up. Didn't even try again.
Okay. If you don't know who he is, he's an investigative journalist, and I've interviewed him before on Triumph Over Targeting podcast, and if things work out, and I'm hoping it will, we'll have him on.
I believe he has joined us.
Great.
This is George. I didn't hear you first off. I apologize.
That's okay. I'm glad you could make it. I was a little concerned because I tried to confirm with you, and I know you're busy, and I knew you were live because I saw your YouTube video you posted this morning. So
sometimes I check my YouTube videos to make sure I'm alive as well. So you're not the only one.
That's good. Well, I'm so glad to have you on and speak to you from this new format. So this is a perfect place for you, Whistleblower Nation. So I set it up so we can celebrate people like you, and you can share some of the information. And I guess one thing I know I consider you an accidental whistleblower, an accidental journalist. Maybe for the listeners who are not familiar with you, you can tell them a little bit about your background, like how you fell into this field, and how you are doing what you're doing these days.
Well, thank you. There's a great series out there written called The Accidental Journalist by a gal in Boston named Trish